Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Poking Politics, a channel that focuses on the current state of American politics and civic engagement with a mix of history and journalism. Today, we have Dr. Pat Supplee, who is the director of Energizing Young Voters, an initiative of the League of Women Voters. She primarily oversees education and curriculum development, and additionally, she has worked previously as an educator and as a consultant for both Georgetown University and the Department of State. Pat, thank you so much for being here today. Pleasure to have you as the first guest for my YouTube channel. Yeah, so excited to have this conversation with you.
I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, for my first question for you today, can you just give us a brief overview of your job at Energizing Young Voters and what it entails? Could you like potentially also describe, what the program is for many of our viewers who probably don't know what it is as well?
Good. I'll start with a description of the program. You mentioned that it's an initiative of the League of Women Voters, and it started out simply as a few volunteers going into classrooms. And then COVID hit, and so we got requests from classroom teachers to expand the program. So now there are two suites of lessons that reflect the two goals of the League of Women Voters. One of the goals is empowering voters. So we have a series of lessons that help young people understand the importance of voting, the struggle to get there, how to make good decisions that align with their own values, and then an experience that lets them go through the whole process before their first time to vote so that any anxiety about what might happen is reduced. And the other part of the program is called Defending Democracy. And those are the lessons that we call Fighting for Change. And they introduce young people to civic engagement, to activism, but in accord with their personal values and the positions that they wish to take about on those. We're issue agnostics. It's not our job to come in and tell somebody what to think or how to think, but to help them through that process. And then we have a communications lesson to help them people learn, and adults as well as young people learn how to communicate, to listen without thinking you have to believe the same thing another person does, but to try to understand their point of view and to speak so they can hear you without wanting to put their fingers in their ears, so that you can get a broad view of what the issues are surrounding what you care about and can speak with people about them. As far as my personal background, you mentioned that I'm a lifelong educator, and that's the case. Uh, the position at Energizing Young Voters that I have is a volunteer position. And all of the adults that work within our organization are all volunteers. The only paid position is one position for an intern each semester of the college year, and that person supports the administration of the program and designs a specific project that they hope to begin that aligns with our goals. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think um, the whole concept of energizing young voters is super interesting too, because previously, before I discovered this organization, I met you too. I think that civic engagement, that there wasn't that as much of an access to civic engagement. So I think this is a really cool initiative for young people to actually take up and actually get a chance to understand, how voting works, the power of their vote, how much our democracy matters as well. Um, that being said, you just mentioned that this is a volunteer position you chose to take up. You could have done anything else right now. Why did you choose energizing young voters? Why did you choose this job?
I think it shows me. I became a member of the League of Women Voters in 2016. I had all of this experience in my background in education, both here and internationally. And when I joined the League, I realized that for the most part, they were mostly older women, women my age and just slightly younger. And I thought that the goals of the League were so important that we were missing a population that needed to know those things, that needed to carry on the message of the League. And I didn't think there was anybody in a better position to do that than me. I had the opportunity to watch someone else teach the first lesson, the timeline of suffrage. And when I saw that, I said to her, I said, you can't keep this to yourself. This is something that all young people need to know. In fact, it's something all adults need to know. And so let's work on it. And so together, she and I expanded it to include the truth about turnout. And then, as I said, COVID hit, and we started getting requests to add things to the program, and it built from there. And it really was the right thing at the right time. So I didn't have to do a whole lot of work to get it to expand. It expanded on its own because of the needs that existed in society at that time.
That's still relatively incredible, though, given that you started this job like at a relatively later age in your life, but you're still, grinding it out though, trying to make an impact on the community. Um,
Mhm.
that being said, you mentioned that throughout most of your life, like you've been an educator, you've had some involvement in politics, both, at like for example, the Department of State. So you have a specific niche of, what government, is all about, what government is supposed to do. In your honest opinion now, through your years and your experience and looking back as well, looking at the political landscape now, you're from New Jersey, obviously, but how do
Mhm.
you feel that both our state and potentially maybe our country too is doing in terms of political efficacy, right? This means getting laws passed, cooperation, involvement from lobbying groups, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
I think as far as the state of New Jersey goes, that since I became part of the startup of Energizing Young Voters, that I've learned a lot more about how our state government works. Prior to that, I think like most people, I thought most of the power and most of the important government resided in Washington, D.C. But the state actually affects more of our lives than does what happens in Washington. I'm not saying Washington's not important. It's just that New Jersey is making the laws that apply to our day-to-day life in New Jersey. I think that learning how the laws are made and learning that as an individual, I actually had some power. I could go to my legislators. I could sit in their office and talk to someone, or I could call them on the phone and make my positions known. Or if I got upset and I really was feeling as if my voice wasn't heard, that I could do things like go and protest in front of my assembly person's office to say, this is what I want you to pay attention to. And because I saw laws come into effect to be signed into law, and I saw that that the protests, even though they may not have been as effective as I would have liked them to be, made an inch of change, little by little. I realized that we really did have some efficacy. We could make a change. I think that's even more true on the local level, on the municipal elections and on the Board of Education elections, because there it's right in your town. As far as making a change in Washington, I think we can, but I think our power is far less. So I choose to stay focused on what happens in the state and try to make the best that we can out of what we're living with. And to teach people, young people, how to do that,
Yeah.
like you.
Yeah, that's honestly such a positive approach in my opinion, especially because from my experience, when I'm consumed by the news every day of, what is going around in the swamp near Washington, like it can definitely feel overwhelming, but at the same time, you as an ordinary person, you feel that you are powerless to do anything about it until you realize that it's not really that affects you, but it's mostly what happens in your state and your local community that actually, actually impacts your lives, and you
Mhm.
get to have the power to make a change for your community. That being said, throughout your time as an educator, you've obviously met with many young people, including myself. Um, but nowadays, young people are often frequently discouraged from political engagement, from volunteering on campaigns, or even, just being cognizant of the issues at hand. What do you have to say to these people?
I think that's a multifaceted question. So I think one of the things that young people don't know because no one has ever taught them, is that in this past election, they were 48.5% of the voting eligible population. 48.5% means that they could have decided the outcome of this election, but they chose not to vote, even if they were registered to vote. There were only about 50% of the people in the state of 50% of the 18 to 29-year-olds in the state of New Jersey who turned out to vote this time. And that's reflected across the United States. Some states are much lower than that. Some are a little bit higher. We're pretty much one of the highest. So I think it's lack of knowledge of the power that's actually in the vote. And by the way, the next election, 18 to 29-year-olds are going to be the majority, and 2/3 of those people are people of color. So there's enormous potential. So we need to educate young people about that potential. If you feel you possibly have the power, you're more likely to do something about it. I think the other piece of that is that until recently, there was almost no attention paid to civics in schools. It got lost once STEM became the most important thing in our minds. And so I think there needs to be a shift back to a greater balance, that high school, middle school are not the place to try to focus young people's attention on just two subjects, math and science. They need the exposure to everything. And part of that exposure, because we are trying to create citizens in schools, that was the initial purpose of education, was to educate the citizenry. Because of that, I think we need to educate young people about voting, certainly, and their responsibility, not just their right to do that. But I think we also need to educate them about how they can actually impact the election, because if they don't know they can, they're not going to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that in regards to what you said about math and science, I feel that's so apparent in my district because my district is a predominantly Asian majority district. And, a lot of my friends at school, they aren't as civically engaged. They don't know as much as the niche details of what is happening in politics. Most of them are focusing on getting into college by focusing primarily on their ambitions of math and science. But I feel like that we as a community can also do better, which I think we can do better and we should. But it's definitely just always going to be an uphill challenge in some regard. But I think that, you know, with with the right power, we can always make a change, right? But as I just said, like this process to change our education system and to improve civic engagement, it is an uphill battle, right? So that being said, like in the past, where has civic engagement been successful? Where are its flaws? And how do you think we can improve it?
Well, I think requiring civics education in middle school and high school is the first step. And we have just recently been able to do that at middle school. There is now, I think within the past 2 years, there is now a requirement that every middle school student gets a semester-long course, distinct course in civics education. So it can't just be part of the social studies course anymore. It has to be unique, separate from. I think the same thing is important to achieve in high school. Right now, high schools, there is a law that requires high schools to be sure that every student who is eligible to vote when they turn 18 is required to be given that opportunity in school, and they are required to have voter education in school. The voter registration happens relatively consistently, but the voter education does not. So I think we need to begin to really work on that. And there is a bill in the New Jersey state legislature this year that would require a semester, I believe it's a semester of voter education, which would include the kinds of things that we do. So that's the first step. And then I think there needs to be more of a balance in coursework. One of the things that is an issue right now is that students in high school are only required to have 3 years of social studies education. They don't get it in their senior year. That is the time, I believe, when it is at least, it's certainly at least as important as junior year, but I think more important because they're closer to being of voting age. Um, One of the other things that I think is important to consider is that in some districts, well, in some cases, 16-year-olds are permitted to drop out of school. And in some cases, in terms of family life, that's necessary for young people, particularly young people of color who need to help support their families. So it really is important for them to get the education as well. And so perhaps junior year is the most important, but we need to make an effort to make it real, to make it important.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely see that too because I think students in my school in the past too, they've tried to incorporate civic engagement into our curriculum. But for example, we have like a financial literacy class, we have AP American Government as as a political course as well. But most of the time, these efforts often do fall flat, mainly because our district, can be strict relatively on, making these changes to the curriculum. Um, but that being said, even if we aren't able to make as much of a dent in civic engagement as much as we would love to, is there any specific area of politics that you do think that young people should get more active about? And if so, why do you think so?
I think they need to understand how government works so that they can make it work for them. So that would be the civic engagement piece. Learning to identify the issue that is of greatest importance to them. Because young people, my experience has been young people care about almost every issue that is a problem in our country today. And you should care about everything that is important. But if you're going to be an agent of change, you have to focus your time and your energy on one thing. And then maybe you can help in the other areas, but don't make them the focus of your life. And once you know what you care most passionately about, you have to figure out how much time and effort you can put into it. So, can you be a leader or do you need to be a supporter? And if you need to be a supporter, how do you do that? Where do you find the groups that you can work with? What's the level of involvement and engagement that you can take? And that might be something as simple as just talking around your dining room table, like Greta Thunberg did when she first started out. Or it might be writing postcards in support of a candidate that you care about a great deal, that you think would be a good person. Or it might be leading a demonstration, like after the George Floyd death, when young people were the ones, or the shooting in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. That was young people who led that and who took the initiative to make it happen.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely see um the potential that my generation has too, but um I wasn't I don't think I was planning on asking you this before this, but you know how for New Jersey, for other states, these state laws, they're made by our legislators, right? By,
Right.
middle-aged adults who are working in Trenton or any other state capital in the country to, pass these laws so that way we can actually get a civic education. But from what I've noticed in my personal experience is that not every adults are in favor of this as well. Some adults aren't exactly as prone to civic engagement. Um, they're not as open to young people, getting, more education on voting as well. How do you th how do you think this is a problem? And what do you think we can do to solve it, especially if we don't have power right now?
I definitely think it's a problem. And I think it's a problem because people in power always want to stay in power. And I would say they're not just middle-aged people in the Assembly and the Senate. They wind up being really old after a while because it is their job and they want to keep their job. So they have to make the people who elect them happy. And if all and the largest turnout groups in elections are people 65 years of age and older. So guess who they're going to pay attention to?
People of their
Guess what
generation.
issues are going to be important to them, the issues that are important to the people that keep them in office. So if young people don't turn out to vote, that's not going to change. If young people turn out in masses to vote, what are they going to pay attention to? The issues that young people have. So it's really up to your generation, but I feel it's our generation's responsibility to teach you that. And it's not going to be the politicians that teach you that. It's going to be the educators.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the reason why you're out there in the field too.
That's
That's
it.
yeah, yeah.
That's it. It's my period of time is over. It is no longer my world, and it is certainly not going to be my world 15 years from now. It is yours. You're going to be the ones who need to be making the
Well,
change.
might as well put the last 15 years to good use though. So
Right. Oh, I do. That this is my legacy.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I think we are I don't want to keep you here for too long, but I guess for my final question I have for you today, is there anything specific that gives you hope about young people and the future of our democracy? What empowers you to keep going and to fulfill the vision that you have?
People, the thing that keeps me going is young people like you. I see you, I see the members of the Young Voters Advisory Board. I see the other people who are ambassadors who are maybe only a handful of the students who are in high school today, but you are the leaders. And having the privilege of working with you is why I get up in the morning. It's really, really wonderful to see your hope, your optimism, and your energy put into making the changes that I think you need to do in order to have the world be better.
Yeah. Yeah, that was some inspiring words though, I have to say nonetheless. That being said, Pat, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope to see you again on the channel, actually back sometime soon. So yeah, thank you so much for talking today.
My pleasure. Thank
Yeah.
you.